So it's now 2021. I've been away from YouTube for a while, but I'm kind of back, and I'll tell you why I've been absent. And it's got to do with the pandemic and with those pesky politicians who've been pooping all over the university sector in Australia. And I'll also give you my free predictions for the university sector and psychology in the year ahead, because that's the kind of thing you're supposed to do, isn't it? Make ill-informed predictions in the hope that if you get them right, you'll be a hero, and if you get them wrong, nobody's going to notice. Why I'm negative about positive back to the story, because I've got a story.
So I've got some top tips on
Might help you to think critically. It helps people like me stop doing stupid things. Anyway, so I'm kind of back, and yes, I'm supporting the COVID lockdown look. Kind of madman comes down from the mountains look, which I think is a fitting way to end 2020. But let's get to why I haven't posted a video for a while. Oh, and I've got the window open, so you'll hear traffic. I live in a quiet street, but today there's traffic for some reason.
Traffic, no more traffic.
I've got to keep the window open because it's blinking hot. Again, it's blinking hot. So I've not made a video for a while, not because I've been living on top of a mountain, just because I've been working at a university, and working at a university in 2020 has been really tough. I've been working my butt off just to try to keep on top of the workload, and that's meant no time for making videos. Now, the university sector got absolutely hammered because of COVID-19. Well, not so much COVID, but the government response to it. The biggest blow was the government stopped anyone from Australia, outside of Australia, coming to Australia. That was the right thing to do. Stop the global spread of the virus, but the big consequence for universities was that meant no more overseas students. Now, a lot of universities have become very reliant on overseas students, largely to make up for a whole succession of government budget cuts to the higher education sector over many years. So a big bit of the sector's income has come from overseas students, and the fees that universities charge overseas students is more than they can charge for domestic students. And so bringing in overseas students can help balance universities' budgets. So when that source of revenue was closed off because of the pandemic, the university sector was in big trouble, and universities were heading for a major cash crisis. And many, probably most, of the universities had to cut their budgets, and that meant cutting staff. So lots of academics and administrative staff, as well as managers in universities, have been made redundant. Of course, the pandemic has hit a lot of industries, but the thing with higher education in Australia is that it got hammered twice. Whilst the government it got hammered by the pandemic, and then the government stepped in to help employers retain their workers. They introduced what they called a job keeper scheme. But they decided that universities would not be eligible for that. And when it came to the university sector, they kind of said, well, stuff you guys. It's your fault for having a weak business model, which meant you're so dependent on overseas students, so you guys got fat and lazy, so maybe you just need to trim down and learn the error of your ways. Now, I'm kind of paraphrasing a bit here, but that's the gist of what they said. Of course, universities had operated a business model like that to make them dependent on overseas students because of the lack of funding coming from the government. So it was a bit rich for the government to blame universities for the problem that the government actually created. Now, the result of the government sticking a finger up at the university sector has been mass staff layoffs across many universities here in Australia. And my university got hit hard, and many of my colleagues lost their jobs. I was one of the lucky ones who survived. We lost around 300 full-time staff, which is a big chunk of our staff, given we only have around 2,500 staff to begin with. I work at CQ University in Queensland. Now, we've lost more staff since then because people were anxious about losing their jobs, so they had a look around to see if they could find a job elsewhere if they were given the chop, and that made those staff more likely to leave. Even if they didn't get made redundant, they were already thinking about leaving. The prospect of having to find other work, and then they did find other work and then left the university. Now, 2 years ago, I was made redundant from Victoria University in Melbourne, so I was kind of happy to survive this time round. It's an awful thing to go through. I had a really rotten experience. Not all universities have staff who work to the highest of professional standards, and I got, bad stuff happened. But that's probably a story for another time. I can't tell that one here. This video will go on too long and I'll probably get sued. So back to COVID. It kind of looks like the government leveraged the pandemic to beat up the university sector. And now, you might be thinking, oh, you've gone off into a flight of paranoia and, haven't you had enough conspiracy theories for 1 year? Well, there's good reason to believe that actually it's what happened, that the government used COVID as an excuse to beat up the university system. And I'm not just saying that because I'm upset about losing my colleagues, though I am. And I'm not just saying that because I think the Australian Prime Minister is a loser, which I think he is. I'm saying it because it's part of a sequence of events that makes it difficult to avoid that conclusion, that the government used COVID to discipline the university sector. In particular, they're focused on weakening those who work in the arts, the social sciences and humanities. And we can see this in how they changed the university fee structure in June 2020, so that arts and humanities degrees, law degrees and politics degrees and such like are going to cost more for students. And those courses bring in less subsidy to the universities from central government. While we've got degrees in STEM fields, as sciences, technology, engineering and maths, fields like allied health, agriculture, information technology, all those sorts of degrees, they're going to cost less and they're going to be better funded. Now, the government says this is all about encouraging students to study in areas where the economy is most needing workers. But as part of what's known as a broader culture war that's been happening for many years between right-wing governments and the university sector. Now, I'm going to make another video on that topic again because this video would end up too long. So, back to 2020. In 2020, the university sector has not been a great sector to work in. What about 2021? Well, here are my predictions for the year ahead for the university sector in Australia and for psychology. So prediction number 1, online teaching. Online teaching is going to grow. Yes, some students didn't like having their courses delivered online, but some did, and there will be enough of them who did to make universities rethink the way they teach. In academia, there's generally been an assumption that online teaching is poorer quality than on-campus teaching. Now, after 2020, that assumption has largely been dispelled. Students have been doing as well, if not better, when learning online as compared with face-to-face on-campus delivery. Now, there have been some surveys, many done in the US, that show students didn't like online delivery of teaching, but that was largely coming from students who enrolled for campus delivery and without being asked had their courses switched to online, so no wonder they weren't happy. That's not what they asked for. It doesn't mean online teaching is bad in the same way if you go to a restaurant and order beans on toast and you get avocado on toast and someone asks you as you come out of the restaurant whether you were satisfied with the meal and the service, you'd likely say, no, I wasn't satisfied at all. And that's not really because you didn't like the avocado on toast, but because you didn't order it. So I predict that in 2021, more students will choose online learning, more universities will rate it favourably, think that it's a good thing to do, and probably more people will eat avocado on toast. So prediction 2, with the Australian government beating up university courses in the arts, humanities and social sciences, and putting through that legislation, making those courses more expensive, I think psychology will likely respond by aligning itself more and more with the medical and biological sciences and with the traditional STEM courses, science, technology, engineering and maths. And psychology, I reckon, is going to argue that it's a science. It's always argued this, but I think it's going to argue it more strongly. And it's going to seek to more closely align itself to those STEM subjects, where that funding is either staying the same or is being increased. And I think it's going to be increasingly hard to work in areas such as critical psychology and critical community psychology, which are much more associated with the arts and humanities. Those connections between psychology and politics. I think working in that area it's always been tough, but I think it's going to get tougher in 2021. And my final prediction 3, I predict that psychology is going to be actively aiming to protect its territory in the mental health field. The pandemic even when it comes under control, will likely leave lasting damage in terms of people's mental health because of the social and economic devastation that's been caused, and not least the death tolls, you know, in places like the US and UK in particular, which have been really hard hit. Now, there will be pressure on psychological services, and it's likely that new training programs in counselling and what they call psychological first aid will be on the increase. And I think that's going to put pressure on psychology in terms of there's going to be increased competition for its traditional and professional accredited psychology. Accredited? There's going to be competition out there. And they're going to have to start protecting their territory in terms of their accredited psychology training programs. So psychology has historically been fiercely protective of its territory around mental health services. So I think we can expect a few dust-ups in the months ahead, particularly around what is appropriate training for psychology and psychologists. Okay, that's all for me. I need to get an haircut, I need to get a shave, and I'll try to make more videos this year than next year, but we'll just have to see how it goes. But I hope for you that 2021 gets steadily better and that we all come out of this mess a bit stronger and a bit wiser. Actually, we need to come out of this mess a lot wiser. So, till next time, ta-da.